going to be very loud this week.
Then this probably isn't the way to start, because they'll turn it up. And then I'll put in a sample, and it'll be like, fuck!
That's what I was hoping for. Yes, welcome. It's just the two of us again.
That's the best.
That's the best.
That's the best.
Yeah,
I hate going out in the street and trying to rope people into doing a podcast.
I know.
You just never know what you're going to get.
Exactly.
Some rascal passing by that'll do anything for a drink or a hand job or
Dave.
both of those.
Yes, so should we get some admin out of the way first before we start?
We always have admin because
Chatting shit.
we always need money.
Yes. Well, by the time this comes out, we'll be getting ready to go to the post box with our lovely vinyls. Vinyl. There's no plural of vinyl. For our lovely vinyl for our paid subscribers.
Is that definitive? There's no plural of vinyl?
Yeah, it's like sheep or deer.
That's one of the most endearing mistakes made by non-English speakers is when they say sheeps.
Yeah.
It's fucking lovely, man. That's why I hug them to death.
I can't remember the name for it, but I was discussing it with my brother recently. We were just like, well, why couldn't they just said sheeps or vinyls? Or there was probably some reason as
because
to
they were
why.
setting the scene for that endearing mistake.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But a vinyl has become a thing in kind of common parlance, hasn't it? So
yeah,
I brought my old vinyls. That's common usage, isn't it?
It is, yes.
Yeah, does make it right.
Yeah. But yes, we have a bunch of lovely records that we're going to give away again this month, including for the digital subscribers, which is everybody basically who's on the tier, some really cool hip hop that we're getting from me.
Finally,
yeah, from Australia.
we cracked it.
Mm-hmm.
Australian hip hop.
Yeah, featuring a friend of the pod as well. He's not the rapper. But yeah, so that's basically all goes to say that we still have a record club running, and we thank everybody who's already a subscriber to that record club. We would like some more. Donations can start at $4 or £4 or four of whatever your local currency is per month.
Donations can start at just $4.
Just four of whatever. 4 pints.
New Israeli shekels. 4 yen.
4. Oh, 4
Sheeps. 4.
Yeah, so it starts at 4, just 4, and you get access to our amazing Facebook group, early access to all episodes, bonus content when we get round to it.
That group, by the way, gives you the power to influence the podcast.
It really does.
We do interact in that. We get some pretty good posts in that. We get a lot of shite in that.
Mm-hmm.
We occasionally write a lot of shite in that. But it means that if there's something that's on your mind, we're going to see it. And there's a very good chance that we'll make a note of it if it's worthwhile, and it will come up at some point. And that's happened on a few occasions now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it has. A few episodes have come out the back of that, and we'll continue to do so, I think.
So if you think you are a budding, what would that be, a show producer?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Producer.
Just
that's too much power.
Pay us $4 a month.
Just 4.
And you'll be able to get in there and get in our ear and influence the direction of this program.
You will indeed. But if you want to take it up a level, the next one is £15 or 15, just 15.
15.
Just 15, and you can get a digital record sent to you every month by an unsunger of your choice, and we've got quite the selection so far. A lot of really fucking great records.
Mm-hmm. Can we make the point? I know a lot of people rely on streaming services for their music. There's something nice about owning these records, especially because a lot of these are bespoke, sort of curated things. You probably aren't going to hear about them unless you get them sent to you by us, because we have spent so long and combing through all these different albums and mini labels and stuff to find these. So there's the curation aspect. Also, there's the fact that the money that you're sending to us, a big chunk of that is going to these artists and going to these labels in a way that, frankly, the streaming services will never do. I mean, for us sending you, let's say, your average digital album, 1 10-track digital album, the artist will probably get, I don't think I'll be exaggerating by saying something like 5,000 times more money for that than they would if you then went and listened to it on Spotify.
Yeah.
So if you're kind of weighing up, like, well, how does that work? I don't carry music around you. You're like, yeah, okay, I get that. But it's a way to keep the music scene alive, and especially at the lower level. So you're helping us fund the pod, and then we're passing, like, the majority of that money, we're then passing on to the small labels and the small groups. And as I say, it is just exponentially more financially helpful than you maybe just going and listening to it on Spotify. And I use Spotify, it's great for that, but there is a time and a place to invest in these people, otherwise they can't keep doing what they're doing. And by doing the digital club, we have actually enabled, I think it's a repress and also I think Gas Giant are in the process of putting together a collection of unreleased music that probably wouldn't have happened unless we'd been doing this. So please, that's the motivation, and we hope that breaks through your stony heart.
Yeah, all these things are on are sent via Bandcamp as well. So the Bandcamp app allows you to store them. So you may have to get another app on your phone if you want to, stay true. You can use it alongside Spotify, which I do. So yeah, it's not too hard, right?
No,
not too hard.
No.
But if you really want to roll with the big people, give us 40.
Well, this varies.
So it varies.
Give us a nondescript number because it's based on your location in the world, because postage is factored in. But yeah, it's averaging out about 35, 40. Mm-hmm. Some of the more far-flung people are paying 50.
Yep.
50. But we are sending things right the way across the planet. I mean, literally right the way across the planet.
Via the mail.
Yeah. And it's expensive to send sheep.
It's expensive. Have you ever tried to send a sheep? Just like some wool is expensive, right? A whole fucking sheep, man. You need to get a container ship. Well, it's a nightmare. A fucking nightmare.
Best idea is suck out the bones first. Because
you can't reassemble it back at the other side, though. And with this particular option, we'll send you actual vinyl, which are different from the bands that we're sending digital ones to. So you actually get two records. You won't get
the same thing twice.
Yeah, you get two records, which is great. And if you actually think, you know what, I like the idea, and I've got a bit of cash to spare, then you can just do an annual subscription, and it'll actually be a discount over the course of 12 months. You get 2 months off if you go annual as well. So yeah, that's the hard sell.
If you're in early onset dementia and easily influenced, then you can send us a year's worth of money and change your will. So that's a lot of admin. That's out the road. There's something we need to discuss
Screamo.
Before we wade into this episode.
Okay.
It's not quite as screamo-y. Paul McCartney. Thoughts?
He's doing no bad for an 8-year-old.
Yeah, so in the sort of unsung group chat.
Oh, you want to do this? You want to do this?
We had some pretty good conversations about this.
I'm too ill for this, man.
But I am not a huge Beatles fan. Mark, you're a bit of a Beatles fan, aren't you?
Yeah, I grew up with them, so
yeah. You seem younger. But
it's all them sheeps.
I am not a huge Beatles fan. There's some stuff I like, but I have to take my hat off. Paul McCartney at Glastonbury, an 80-year-old man, 80-year-old man doing a 3-hour set?
Almost a
3-hour set of music. And we were talking about this because I think, was it earlier in the day or the day prior, Diana Ross had been doing a set, and Diana Ross is 78.
And she's on tour just now as well.
And she's on tour. Yeah, and technically women live longer, so she's even younger on average. But Diana Ross did a set, and Diana Ross is really struggling to sing now. She's 78. I'm not criticising her for not dancing on stage, but what you're getting for your money going to a Diana Ross concert, I would say, throws into question whether or not it should be a thing that's happening. We were debating the notion of ageism, and being the edgelord that I am, kind of came down on the side of the fact that I think ageism is entirely appropriate in certain things. It's appropriate in professional sports because there's a level of product that people are entitled to expect, and I think it's somewhat appropriate in music. Now, not as a flat rule, but because there are certain styles, Tom Waits is probably still going to be fucking great right up until the day he pops his clogs.
Bob Dylan as well.
Bob Dylan, jazz musicians, some of them are even better the older they get. But there are certain other styles of music, and especially where like a vocal range is concerned and you can't deliver. And not only can't you deliver, but you're kind of trying to deliver and missing it and stuff, where I'm just hit with the realisation that this shouldn't be happening. I don't think this is good. And we'll not get right into the nitty-gritty of that, because I think it really speaks to a lot of things about the musical culture we're in. We were also talking about what is Glastonbury going to look like in 30 years, because we don't really produce legacy acts now. I think we said Arctic Monkeys. Oasis are becoming a legacy act already. There's not that many bands of this era that will be able to take the main stage in Glastonbury in 30, 40 years and actually cause a stir. It's not really a thing that's happening now. Acts are very short-lived. I felt there was a huge contrast as well between somebody like Paul McCartney, who could have played 6 hours and still had tunes in the bag, versus Billie Eilish, who I think I know 1.5 songs by her, and I just think there's such a huge gulf between these things now that I wonder what these festivals are going to look like when that generation finally does start to die out and the pack thins. Anyway, that all said, Paul McCartney, what a fucking effort, Macca. That was pretty amazing. And I noticed there were a few eye rolls about Dave Grohl. I don't think there were as many eye rolls about Bruce Springsteen.
It's because he's the boss.
He's the boss. But it worked, didn't it?
Yeah, it totally did work. It's kind of that's a festival moment you come to expect, right?
Yeah. Well, the thing is, they don't often deliver it. I don't think the Kanye one delivered at all. I thought that was a fucking embarrassing, actually.
Kendrick Lamar was fantastic as well, and I'm not a huge fan of Kendrick Lamar. But back to Paul McCartney, just back to your point about, you know, basically knowing when to give in. I think there are artists who are younger than Paul McCartney who are in that category. John Bon Jovi being the one that immediately springs to mind. If you see any of the videos online of him recently, he just can't do it anymore. And that's probably because vocally it's not possible. It's a physical degradation. I mean, your vocal cords are something that deteriorate, you know, and if the style of singing is dependent on them being pristine, I mean, it is different for Tom Waits because of the style of singing that he does. It's different for Nick Cave to some extent. You know, if you're Diana Ross, or especially John Bon Jovi, I'd imagine Tom York will probably have a tough time as he gets older. You know, these people are going to struggle with their voices. And Paul McCartney he's still got a cracking vocal range for his age.
He does.
There's a lot of people that are his age, Brian Wilson, that just can't do it, man. You know, and that's another thing. I think there's a lot of people on Twitter saying that his voice was a shadow or Stevie. I was like, well, it's still a fucking great shadow. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can't. It's like you said, you can't rock up and expect to hear him like he was in the 60s. It's just not going to happen. But I guess you always be clever in adapting your songs to make them fit.
Yeah, I think you have to put it on like a kind of relative scale, and if you compare the quality of his performance or like the quality of a contemporary Bruce Springsteen performance, which is not vintage but it's still an amazing show, you compare that to the quality of thing you're getting from other artists who are really struggling. John Bon Jovi being a really good example, and it's a shame for him. It is a shame for him, but he's just, you are not getting a good product when you go and see that now. I just don't know that there should be a sort of indefinite run to your career in certain ways. I mean, I think it's, if you're a footballer and you can't sprint, then are you really a footballer? You know, and I don't know about that.
You can change the direction of your career as you get older, because like I find it really difficult for someone like John Bon Jovi to keep thinking that he can do that album after album, knowing the fact that his voice is getting worse. You would change your songwriting style, like Paul McCartney has done throughout his career. Elton John's a good example as well.
Aye. I was going to say, like, try to think of some other examples of people who've certainly lowered their range, and in some cases like darkened the style of singing that they do, become bluesier or whatever. Steven Seagal,
oh, what a man.
And some would say his later stuff's his best stuff. So
I was going to say
Kim Jong-un.
Mr. Putin, please. I was going to say, as part of the conversation that we had, and it's worth bringing in now, is that I'm going to see Guns N' Roses very soon, very, very soon.
Exhibit A, my lad.
And I only bought a ticket because it's Slash and Duff, and I'll never see him live ever again, and I've never seen him live before because obviously way before my time. Axl Rose's Guns N' Roses have been touring basically forever. Like, they haven't never stopped, really, right? So as a band, they're always going to be good. Right, his voice is never always going to be good because it was hard to keep up back in the early 90s when we were doing Use Your Illusion tour. His voice was starting to lose some of his shine back then. He's since had surgeries and stuff, and you know what, he can still hit those notes and stuff, but it doesn't sound like the same singer. But that's not where you go for the whole band and the whole show, right? And he's obviously a big feature.
I think I was pretty burned by going to see Flock of Seagulls. What I basically saw was the singer, who now looks like the third Mitchell brother, kind of grunting his way through this 80s pop with a bunch of like really young hired guns. And I will say, was that song Ran? I Ran?
Yeah, I Ran.
They did do that justice. I don't know if they'd maybe taken it down a couple of notes, but the rest of it was pretty brutal. And I think I was just like, oh my god, what the fuck am I doing? this is so silly. I was trying to will myself to enjoy it, but see, once I got sucked out of that mental space, and I was like, no, be objective. This is fucking shit. if this, you know, it's maybe not a fair metric, but when I watch a band, it doesn't matter how famous they are, I do also in the back of my mind think, imagine this was the first time you'd seen this band. Imagine this is a new band. How are they doing? And I think a lot of famous bands fail to make that measure, because we invest. You know, if we like a band, we make the band good in our heads, even if the band was very, very average. And that's why so many people obviously leave shows with different perceptions of the shows, how much they're invested in it. But when I got sucked out of that moment with Flock of Seagulls, I was like, this is fucking embarrassing. You would see this in a pub. So yeah.
Another thing we mentioned in this chat is that nostalgia is a huge factor. It kind of hints at what you were, kind of ties into what you were saying there.
So Paul McCartney, talking about famous institutions, the United Nations, another famous institution,
yeah. Which also, you know, the first album did have the Abbey Road cover with the Beatles on fire.
Oh, that's right. There's a nexus.
Yeah.
So Mark has chosen United Nations. Mark, do you want to tell us a wee bit about this?
So United Nations by United Nations is the first album by the band United Nations.
Yes, it is.
It was released in 2008, and it's basically a hardcore supergroup. I always thought they were a grindcore band, but I've since listened to a lot of grindcore doing this podcast, and they're actually way more a screamo band than a grindcore band. I think
that was missold to me a wee bit as well, because I was like, this is a bit more screamo.
Yeah.
Mark, I'm not sure this is actually a band. I can't find them on Facebook. Why is it? Is something going on?
Something has went on, yeah.
Will we get to that?
Let's get to that, yeah. So formed in 2005, over to Geoff Rickly from Thursday had a chat with his good pal Daryl Palumbo, who may or may not be in the band, about like basically their love for like really chaotic screamo, like Nation Ulysses, Orchid, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And they never really did anything about it until Geoff was kind of a wee bit bored with his band Thursday and thought, you know what, I'm going to make this happen because I think it'll be a lot of fun.
You know, that's something we have in common, because I'm kind of bored with his band as well.
With Thursday or this one?
Yeah, Thursday.
I'm not a huge Thursday fan personally, so I feel as though to me they're a band we probably should do on this podcast, because they're a huge band for that scene of music.
Surprisingly big, yeah.
But they never grabbed me. Never really, apart from the odd song. I've tried so hard to get in them. I've got loads of friends that love them, and I never thought Geoff Rickly's screaming voice was that great either on Thursday. But when I heard this, it was right up my fucking street, man. You know. I had a few different members of the band. I have written them down if we want to talk about who they may or may not be.
Yeah, there's some disagreement, because this band, their publicity shots are like wearing Reagan masks, right?
For the first album it was, yeah.
Aye, and so it's pretty vague, and they like to throw out a lot of red herrings. You know, it's kind of edgy, it's kind of fun. So there are theories on who's in it. I think we've probably got a different list of people. I was looking through message boards and stuff. Where did you get yours? I just cobbled them together from various different places online. Right, so okay. Before we do that, let's start off by saying Geoff Rickly is the only official member of the band, because when the band formed, he was the only member that wasn't under contract with another record label. Since then, it's come to be known that there are two people in the band who I don't know if they played in the first album, but certainly played in the next 4 years. The second album is Jonah, the journalist, and Luke Previn, who actually played guitar for Thursday from 2011 onwards. So I think he must have been pals via the scene with Geoff. So technically the band has three members that are recognised as being members, but loads of people have played with them. Some people even played shows when Geoff hasn't even been there and just done vocals for them, you know what I mean? So been a whole bunch of people that's played with it, which I think that actually is pretty cool, right? This whole revolving door thing, it's our music, none of the music is copyrighted, you know. We're like MF Doom.
Yeah, pretty much.
Send somebody else it.
Totally.
Yeah, the copywriting thing really intrigues me. Let's talk about that in a minute, but give me some names.
So Daryl Palumbo from Glassjaw. Supposed to have started the band with Geoff Rickly. It hasn't been confirmed, but they released a song in 2017 called Stairway in Mar-a-Lago, and I am about 90% sure he's the vocalist on that song. It sounds like him.
So I realise that Glassjaw was a huge deal for a lot of people. I think, in fact, arguably one of the most influential breakout acts in an entire era of that kind of plaintive, yelpy, heartfelt, angsty screamo stuff. But to me, Daryl Palumbo's voice was like dragging a fork across a metal surface.
Yeah, I mean, it's similar to Geoff Rickly's. I think, it's take it or leave it,
It's pretty OTT. I mean, there's moments in Glassjaw that do undeniably click for me, but ultimately I think easily the best thing he did was Beating Heart Baby with Head Automatica, where he really found a niche where that OTT sort of sexy boy fucking thing really kind of it sat nicely.
You gotta get away from me, 'cause you want nothing to do with me. Baby, is this love for real?
So he's not a selling point on this project.
Well,
for me.
later Glassjaw stuff is a lot more, it moves really far away from that kind of yelpiness. It's a lot more, a bit psychedelic in places, but also heavy. It's actually really cool. For me, the selling point was that he was potentially involved back in the time when this record came out, and I was a big Glassjaw fan back in the day. The first album was problematic as fuck now, and maybe talk about that at a later date.
Is it? That's interesting. I didn't know that.
Because the whole album is basically about, like, the story goes, right, that he was straight edge up until the second Glassjaw album, till Head Automatica. Basically he was completely straight edge. And that also involved the no sex, no like fucking around thing, basically. So he was like seeing this one, he was like devoted to this one woman, or this one girl, I guess, because they would have been teenagers. The first album, Everything You Ever Wanted to Know About Silence, is basically him ripping her to shreds and calling her a whore, basically, because she cheated on him. There are songs on it which really go to town on that metaphor, but quite difficult to sell if it was to come out these days, that's for sure. There's some really, if not borderline misogynistic, definitely misogynistic language on it, I would say. A lot of people that I know still like Glassjaw, not ready to confront that reality, but it hasn't aged well.
Deal with
it, yeah. So yeah, he was one of them. Ben Collar's the other one.
Ben Collar, Converge, top 5 of all time for me. So
he's definitely on this record, right? The first one.
And most projects he's involved in are really worthwhile.
It sounds like him on the first record. There's no doubt about it, man. Like I said, Jonah Bayer, journalist, Lukas Previn, Ryan Bland, he did some live vocals for them.
That's a good name, eh?
Yeah, he's apparently he's a New York hardcore scene legend. He's in a band called Ache, but I don't really know much about him, but apparently he's well known in that scene.
R. Bland,
yeah. Maybe that's not his real name. I've been surprised if it wasn't his real name, to be honest.
I had a guy, Eric Cooper, the bassist that Made Out of Babies.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool band. That's a band that Steve mentioned.
Yeah, he did, that's right. I wonder if I knew the name. Yeah, We got Chris Conger from the Number 12 Looks Like You.
Yes, never heard them.
They are very much of this kind of band, like the screamo.
How would the Number 12 look like someone?
I don't know.
Side on?
Maybe.
Hang on, I'm looking at it right now. If you were kneeling down and your bum was in the air and you had a beak.
Number 12 looks like a bird. Jim Carroll from, not that Jim Carroll, not from Jim Carroll Band. Jim Carroll from The Hope Conspiracy, and he was also in a band called Pure Love with Frank Carter, which is the first thing he did after Gallows, which is power pop, basically. Really interesting turn for Frank Carter, actually.
I'm so sick of singing about hate. It's never gonna make a change. It breaks me down bit by bit. Keep me steadily feeling sick.
He played guitar on the first record as well. And then more recently Zach Sewell and David Hulk from Pianos Become the Teeth. Zach Sewell, the drummer, and Dave Hulk, the bass player of that band. Good band. Very much like have a lot sonically in common. They're more of that kind of Tushy Amore melodic hardcore style, but vocally and melodically you can hear their influence definitely in the second record anyway.
So see that anonymity, there's an element of that which I guess it was necessitated by the label stuff, but also it was a sense that we want to see how good this project is on its own merits. So it's quite enigmatic. There's a selling point there, but it is also because you're not 100% sure who it is. And to be perfectly honest, some of those names as well are not exactly like box office. So it's really like, how good is this?
If you think about it, at the time it came out, right, Thursday hadn't broken up yet, but they were still riding pretty high. Attaching Geoff Rickly's name to the project and being like he clearly did come up with it. It would have been the biggest draw apart from Daryl Palumbo, and he was probably doing Head Automatic at the time. So yeah, it makes sense.
Isn't it true that so after they'd done the major label debut War All the Time, he was quoted as saying, I wanted to write the first UN record as the next Thursday record. I had all this super grindy blasty stuff, and I was just like, let's completely disconnect from melody and try and get off a major label. Yeah,
that's the hardcore guy coming out, right? They had they were on the major label, I think, only for 2 albums anyway. That makes sense. And I think from the same article you're talking about, Thursday, they were like, absolutely not. We're not fucking doing that. There was like some serious, no, we can't do that, which is fair. He also said in that interview that he still liked the idea of being able to go out and play house shows and sleep on floors and all that, and take risks with the music. And I suppose when you get to a major label, you start to think less about taking risks. And War All the Time is probably one of the most, if not the most, accessible Thursday albums.
I mean, they had festivals to play. You know, the band were like, come on, Geoff, we've just got here. Can we not fuck it up straight away? Although there is something about that sentiment that I really like. I find that quite relatable, but I am also compelled to question Geoff Rickly's judgment.
Why?
Because Geoff Rickly went and became the singer of a band called No Devotion, which is Lost Prophets minus the kiddie fiddler. I am just perplexed by that, right? And hey, the other people in Lost Prophets might be perfectly nice guys. They might have genuinely known nothing about Ian Watkins' problematic behaviour, as hard as that is to believe. It may well be the case that they never saw anything that was problematic, and that could be very, very true. But Lost Prophets were fucking shite, right? So, I mean, I know they were successful, but they were fucking shite successful. Are you not tempted to question the judgment of a guy who listens to Lost Prophets and thinks, the only real issue with this is that the singer's a kiddie fiddler, and this other a group of four musicians?
Five.
This is something the world still really needs. I mean,
well, they are quite a different. No Devotion are a completely different band, like sonically from Lost Prophets. They're like a post-punk band.
What was he hearing that tipped him off to that, though?
Well, this is going back in my knowledge. This is going like way back in the depth of my mind here, man. But I seem to remember back then, I was quite perplexed when I heard about it happening as well, because I was like, what the fuck, man, that's mental. And I seem to remember Geoff Rickly saying in an interview that he actually, he felt really bad that they were now being robbed of a chance to make a living. Yeah,
they're being punished for something they didn't do. I get that.
And they were like, but he's like, well, I think these guys are great musicians. We tour with Lost Prophets, and they still wanted to make music, and they asked me if I wanted to sing with them, and I said yes. So,
but as I say, they've been punished for something they didn't do. They should be punished for something they did do, which was the Lost Prophets music. And there's nothing about that band that makes you think this needs to continue. I mean, have you heard Weapons, their last album from 2012?
I had at the time. I've not heard it since then.
Fucking sucks,
man. I never liked them. I always thought they were a shit band.
Generic,
anyway.
smarmy, swaggering, glossy emo metal pish. I'm just immediately suspicious of any project fronted by a guy who listens to a song like We Bring an Arsenal from that album and thinks, despite the fact that this brand is already associated with the molestation of literal infants, this is some magical musical collective that needs to be kept alive in some form. That is a decision I cannot get with. I just can't fucking figure it out. I mean, the brand is poisoned. Even if No Devotion were a fucking right on excellent band, which there is no reason to think they would be, but even if they were, it's so fucking poisoned. Like, those guys need to split up, even if they're great pals, something exceptionally bad happened, then you need to split up and go and do something else. Because nobody's going to be like, if a great band comes out and they're like, that's the basis from Lost Prophets, nobody's going to shoot that band right the fuck down. But if you're like, that's 4 of the 5 or 5 of the 6 members of Lost Prophets, yes, you're going to get shot down.
Well, you know, I think they were still obviously writing music, and it was nothing like Lost Prophets, so it was never going to sound like that band anyway, which is probably what they wanted to do. But I also think the brand was poisoned because time has proven that people didn't give a fuck about it. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like, it didn't go anywhere. I think they tried to do it. I think they've been writing a second album for about fucking 10 years or something, or like 8 years or something like that. Or maybe they have, and it's coming out soon, I don't know, but like, they just vanished.
They could have been spending that time in new projects. You know what I mean? 1 or 2 of them go somewhere, 1 goes another. Just like, the world's a big fucking place. I'm sure you've got lots of contacts in the industry. I don't, unless you've been like quarantined together because of what happened. Like, I just don't get it. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, Lost Prophets drummer, I think it was, I don't know if it was a second or third one, the one who was in the band when they fucking died broke. Anyway, it broke. Ellen Rubin, he played for Nine Inch Nails for a long time, and he's a fantastic drummer.
There you go. That's a perfectly acceptable way to progress your career.
Yeah, totally. And he was really young as well. I think weird now you think about it.
Not young enough for Ian.
I think like he was in his late teens, like 18, 19, when the rest of the band were in their probably 30s when he joined the band, which is now super creepy when you think about it. And but this was before No Devotion, and it's funny because the second album was come after No Devotion, which is weird. But I like the idea of this record. I like the idea of this band, not just because I think they're cool and they sound good. I just like the idea of like Geoff Rickly saying, I want to keep taking chances with the music. I like this idea of I still need this outlet for this stuff, and the major label's not going to get me there anymore.
So I'm a little bit intrigued about the motivation and the themes, and I guess to some extent the ambitions for the project. I like your point, and I agree with your point about Thursday attained a level of success that took Geoff Rickly away from this quite enjoyable, nostalgic experience of playing small club shows and, if not DIY touring, but, you know, one step up from that. And I get the appeal of that, I totally do. But I think in terms of, from the band's name, for example, and the general approach, it initially seemed quite acerbic and quite overtly political. But to be honest, the more I've read into it, the lyrics and the titles of the tracks, and I'm not so sure that it can be characterised as overtly political.
I don't think it really is, to
it's
be
a
honest.
bit more nihilistic. It's quite cynical. As we mentioned, they do a lot of disinformation stuff. The publicity and the press releases seem to be focused on kind of messing with people, making fun of how gullible the rock press are, throwing, as I said, red herrings out to their fans, like, oh, we'll do this, here's a concept album we're going to record that they never intended to record. And I pulled out some lyrics that I thought were interesting. Petty Animal from Nevermind
the Bombings, here's your 6 figures.
6 figures. Run, sleep in the streets, run in the gutters, head in your hands, blood in your country's teeth, run away. It's sort of like vaguely political. You can tell there's like an aggression and a sort of ambiguous political tone to it of protest, but it never really hones in, you know, and that to me kind of epitomised that. The Spinning Heart of the Yo-Yo Lobby from United Nations, the album we were talking about. We've got a lot, but we want more. Exploit the wage on the stage of the third world. Entertainment, ! For fun and profit, for parents and screaming children. And again, and I'm not trying to shit on it, but that is like a little bit like a kind of teenage punk rock thing, quite vague. And so this idea that this is like a kind of proactive political band was starting to maybe dissipate a bit for me. I was like, this is sort of alluding to disenfranchisement or politics or corruption, but it never specifies anything.
Well, I guess it's interesting because when they released the next 4 years, which is like a cool box set, which we'll talk about in a second, Geoff Rickly said in an interview, which I think there was the one you're talking about that you quoted earlier on, is like it was mostly about critiquing careerism in punk rock music and that specific parts of that culture. He talks about like all different layers of hypocrisy that exist in it. For example, a Minor Threat t-shirt being $28 at Urban Outfitters, or to that being a thing where somebody would set up a whole set of ideals to combat the fact that it's $28 for a Minor Threat t-shirt, the fact that Minor Threat accidentally started straight edge, and there's so many layers that are wrong with it. It's just anti everything.
It became a perpetual adversarialism.
Yeah, and I think that's
Ouroboros.
Yeah, because it also, if you think about the music, well, lyrics, maybe even the music, I guess, as through that lens, it makes sense as to why you'd fuck with people for this information by saying, oh yeah, we got fucking Kirsten Shaw to write lyrics for us, or we worked with the guys for Homestar Runner, which is like David Showalter and McLean Black and stuff like that, which clearly didn't happen, you know.
I think I generally became aware of an overarching political disaffection. There were some decent turns of phrase dotted about, but as I say, the songs never committed to any specific subject. There was no actual insight or focus point that I could discern, just a sort of freewheeling misanthropy and post-Generation X cynicism. There were lyrics about the left and the right being exactly the same, talk about false flags, talk about capitalism, talk about babies and the feds and loads of buzzwords. And I think those sort of slogans make for it nice sound bites and sing-alongs. They certainly make for good sing-alongs at a punk show, but I didn't find the albums presented any real vision or agenda. Felt, as I say, a bit like the work of a teenager. Not awful by any means, but glib, you know what I mean? Very easy, very cheap kind of sloganeering, superficially satisfying certainly, but sloganeering.
Well, his contention is all the songs are set up as jokes and the punchlines are all incredibly sad. I guess that's the way that I look at it, because The Shape of Punk That Never Came is one of the names of this. He actually directly quotes a refused lyric in it, saying, it's fucking shit, this didn't happen, right?
Right, but you know, it's interesting that you mention them though, because Refused are a band that work best at a certain age, right? And then you get to a point where you're like, oh, wait a minute, because I think they were prone to a kind of generic posturing as well, which hasn't aged all that nicely. I think this project and its demeanour reminds me a bit of Dead Kennedys, and I wouldn't be surprised if it grew from some discussions of that as well, you know, backstage conversations at a festival and stuff between guitarists and singers and stuff. But the lyrics aren't as clever or as focused as the Dead Kennedys. They don't hone in on things the way Jello Biafra did. You know, they never risk being specific.
Yeah.
I don't know, is the record trying to be sincere and hard-hitting? I don't know.
I wouldn't say so. I mean, he said that the whole thing was just started just for fun.
That's it. It almost feels, though, that being sincere would be too much like trying, and trying risks failing. It almost, you know, it's easier to set up a kind of sort of sneering, sarcastic joke than it is to try and make a serious point. You know, what Jello Biafra did in the Dead Kennedys is more risky, because there's more people wanting to shoot you down, and there's more ways that you could get it wrong than if you can just pass everything off as a joke. It's a bit of a get out. Do you know what I mean?
But you got to think as well, like, he's coming from Thursday, who are a super sincere, like, really serious band, take themselves very seriously. You know, so that is the complete antithesis of that, and musically, and I guess in terms of... I
guess I was just expecting something really different here, because I mean, I know we spoke in advance about how it was quite grindcore-y, and in the end it didn't really come across as that. And then I think also I just left, whether intentional or not, I'd left our conversations with the impression it was quite a political band. I think the name suggests that, and it isn't really. It's a disaffected kind of teenage project to some, even though he's in his 30s. It doesn't have either of those things. So I was really, as we were listening to it this week, kind of coming to terms with, this is not what I expected. Thought I was getting an extremely overtly political grindcore album,
and it's not it. Yeah,
it's not that.
Yeah, I thought I would have called it grindcore in my youth, but it's having done proper grindcore on this podcast and then listening to it for this show, I was like, well, it's actually a lot more power violence or screamo. I personally never felt it was very political. I'm sorry if I gave you that impression. Like, I never thought, like, the name's political.
I don't know, I maybe just arrived at that, you know, in the snippets that I looked at and the titles and stuff like that. I think, speaking personally, being honest, I would have probably preferred an all-out kind of earnest political confrontation, especially given that, as you said, they've got these other projects, all of them, that give them an outlet for their more kind of prosaic leanings. I don't know, that would probably have tickled me a bit more. I'm not sure the world needs more sort of cynical / nihilistic, you know, sneering, ironic rock. But that is not to say it's not really good. We'll come to that. But I mean, I will say on this record, the original cover was banned, but I love it. I think I should probably have taken from that there was a bit of political nihilism about it, because the cover has that beautiful throwaway, snidey kind of air about it. You know, it's just like, take Abbey Road, put the Beatles on fire. I really like that sense of humour. I think it's a really nice, irreverent thing. It's done by James Cauty
from KLF.
KLF, yeah. I think that's a great cover. I really enjoyed that about it. And I think maybe if I'd paid more attention to that, I'd be like, there's a lot of sarcasm at play here, more than I'm maybe expecting.
Apparently Jim Cauty said that you can use the artwork, but you need to say you stole it from me, not that you got it from me.
Oh my god, the KLF are something else, man.
And he basically said after that, the problems that happened after this are your fault now, and they're not mine. which totally makes sense. But yeah, I think they played Barack Obama's inauguration and stuff like that. They have done some political shows, and the proceeds from the latest single, Stairway to Mar-a-lago, they went to, any profit they made went to the ACLU. So there's obviously political intent somewhere in the mix. I guess I just never really paid attention to it much, or thought it was that overt when it was there. I just liked that it was nihilism, you know. I just like that.
Isn't it a bit of a shame that there's nobody picking up the baton from Dead Kennedys now?
I'm so disengaged with political punk music because it feels a bit passé to me now that I couldn't say if there was or wasn't. I'm pretty sure there are.
Well, there's no conspicuous leading lights,
yeah,
you know, right above the parapet the way they were.
If I thought about it, I'm sure there's going to be people that come and correct me right after this goes out.
I read some of the reception online. There's a blog called Sophie's Floorboard. It had quite a nice write-up on them. United Nations are a rare breed, to say the least. It's very rare for a band to come along with an overt socio-political agenda for radical change and challenge within Western social structure and ideology. The thing is, I'm not seeing that, as I say, and it's interesting that another reviewer has interpreted their music in this way when I am getting exactly the opposite impression the more familiarised I get with it. I mean, Rickly started a reply in a Pitchfork interview with the quote, "As much as the band is a joke." So, I mean, fuck it, it's a joke band. Yeah. It's a joke. I just feel like nobody can really decide what the fuck this actually is.
That's kind of beautiful though, right?
It's very Gen X, isn't it? Tell me about the copyright stuff. I'm fascinated by that, because they refused to copyright the band name, obviously, which cost them potential earnings, but helped protect them when the actual United Nations
sent them a cease and desist letter.
came calling, sent them a cease and desist letter. It led to the MySpace and Facebook pages being deleted.
So basically, because of the members had to be anonymous as well, they didn't copyright any of the songs, which is actually pretty cool.
So how does that work?
It means that you can use them however you see fit, I guess.
So it's royalty-free music.
I mean, that's what I would assume. I guess that also means maybe they don't get royalties from streaming and stuff like that.
PRS and MCPS, but
I guess it would make sense if the proceeds from the last single went to the ACLU and any money they make is just given away because they, I don't know. But yeah, apparently it's copyright free because they couldn't. I don't know about the second album, but the first one definitely.
So they can press it and release it and sell it. Presumably, so could we.
Yeah. The record label that released the first
idea, press and release.
They re-released it. Well, maybe that's different now because they re-released it in 2015 because it went out of print really quickly because of the album cover. Although I do actually have a CD copy and it's just black, completely black.
Yeah.
For some reason, it's got a paper. It's got like a hole punch through the barcode in the back. Maybe I got it as a promo or something. I don't know.
You know that Hot Topic destroyed 7,000 copies of the CD because there was a no return policy, which is genius. So they bought the CDs. And then there was a no return policy in the CDs, so they couldn't return them once the protest started about the cover, which is a ridiculous protest anyway. And reportedly the staff sent the band photos of them destroying the CDs as they were doing it.
And Geoff Rickly, I think he also says that we end up getting paid. We get paid for it, but we're like, this is kind of absurd. We get paid for this, and now you destroy them. That's just completely bizarre.
That's genius. Yeah. If you can sell tens of thousands of CDs to different outlets who then just have to count them, fantastic.
He talks about the United Nations stuff in a Noisy interview from 2010, I think. So the United Nations were trying to convince them that they were being harassed by the band United Nations. They actually went to the record label because they couldn't find out who was in the band because it was just Geoff Rickly, everybody else was anonymous, and they were like, "Is this you?" And they were like, "No." And then they asked the publicist, "Is it you?" "No, it's not us." So their publicist basically got in touch with them and quit immediately. And he was like, "I can't represent you guys." And he was like, Jeff said, "But why?" you're not going to get in trouble for it. You're just representing a band that's done something wrong. And he's like, I don't know, man. I smoke a lot of pot and they're going to come to my house and destroy my life.
Fuck me.
And then the retailer stopped carrying the record. And so that was the whole point of it. It's like none of the songs were copyrighted, so nothing was legally tied back to the people that were in the band. It was our label that decided to not copyright it. So when they did cease and desist, they'd already made all those copies. And then Eyeball just kept making them until they shut down the record label.
See, I find the story as compelling as the album itself. I think it's interesting, especially that it was uncopyrighted and the anonymity around it and stuff. It's something that I think probably, given that it's a pretty solid album, yeah, you would think more people would know about it as a talking point.
So that was the first album, and then we can run through the second album dead quickly. It's a short record, but the story, the legend around that is also pretty cool.
There's also an EP in between, Never Mind the Bombing, Here's Your Six Figures.
Yeah, so the story behind that is that Death Wish were like, fuck it, we're just going to release it. Because obviously the name United Nations was a wee bit like, fuck, can we really do it? And they were like, fuck it, we'll just do it. If it happens as it happens. And Ben Frost, the Australian artist, was the one that did the record cover for that.
That's right.
And you know, that's actually really good. I quite like Petty Animal. It's really tight and really focused. I like the guitars on Risen Angels. Never mind the bottom.
Risen Animal. You Bright and Risen Angels.
Yeah.
Is that?
Yeah.
It's rampaging. I like that about it, but I'm not so convinced about the song passages and it's a little bit formulaic.
I don't know, I quite like Nevermind the Bombing, the actual song. It sounds like Thursday, but a screamo version of them, and I don't like Thursday that much, but the things that I like about Thursday are the heavier songs, and it really works for me. And I think this is completely conjecture on my part, right? I might be wrong, but this is like straight out of my head here. So there's another vocal in that song, right? And I'm about 90% sure it's Jeff Hirsch for the band Blacklisted. It sounds exactly like him. I've not seen anything about that online, but I would bet my house on the fact that that's Jeff Hirsch for Blacklisted that's doing that vocal.
Him?
Yeah.
You'll have to refute it. We'll tag him and everything.
Or somebody that sounds a hell of a lot like him from another one of those bands, because he played with Blacklisted, like Thursday, and like they're off part of that same scene, you know. So I'm pretty sure that's him. Just a wee bit of trivia there, straight from my brain.
Sleuthing.
Yeah.
So the next 4 years.
Yeah, so this is a fictional discography of the band.
It's a fictional discography of a band, the band, going from like their earliest starting point through their kind of more commercial phase and then their proggy phase.
Yeah. So it came as a box set originally. He said it's kind of weird actually, because they had to release it on CD and streaming, and it actually fucked with a couple of the ideas they had for the record. So it comes with a cassette, which is the songs is it Fuck the Future and Stole the Past and United Nations versus United Nations are 3 songs in that cassette, and that's supposed to be their demo, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And it's got 2 7-inches, which is like when they were commercial, and then the 10-inch at the end, which has got F hash, A hash.
It's F sharp, A sharp, dollar, which is a mistake of F sharp, A sharp infinity by Godspeed You Black.
Yeah, and that's them basically saying this is our attempt at being Godspeed and being proggy and stuff. It sounds nothing like Godspeed, absolutely fucking nothing like it. But it's quite funny and fun as well. And it's got Jeff singing on it, which you don't hear very much in this band. But it feels closer to Death Heaven, that song, to me than anything else.
It's one of the most interesting, largely due there's a drum beat in it with an excellent hi-hat stab that offsets the snare, and the mix has kind of really been set up to showcase that beat. Unlike anything else on here, the way it transitions to that meaty fuzz bass and the clean guitar reminds me a bit of Botch.
Mm-hmm.
That, you know, the approach that Botch took at the end of We Are the Romans.
Yeah.
Although I'd say it's a wee bit less well considered and musically accomplished than Botch, but at the end you can see the big final resurgence of the song coming a mile away. But it's kind of rewarding. It's a satisfying record that's well executed. I'm not convinced it's world beating in any sense, but it's visceral, it's gripping at times.
I think Serious Business is a fucking cracking power violence song. Really, really good. I think.
Yeah, I'd seen power violence used in a few references to this record. And I think the way it kicks off and the production, they're all about impact, you know, like maximum impact. Vocals are really harsh and raspy instead of barking. The guitars in that one are big and washy. They've got more than a hint of Sunbather to them as well, that Black Gaze thing.
Yeah.
And I think Sunbather had been released a year prior to that. It's also, do you notice that if at the end it's a bit like Phantom of the Opera?
Is it? That's probably deliberate. Yeah. Aye. That does work. See the song Revolutions at varying speeds?
Yeah, the mix is quite different in that one.
Do you know why?
No.
Because they recorded the song at 35 RPM and at 45 RPM for the vinyl version, and then they put it on the record so you didn't know which one you were going to get. So there were different versions and different records, basically.
Oh, right, okay.
So the way it turned out is they ended up having to record like a super long version of the song to make it work. Let me get the quote because it's fucking really fascinating, man. This is a direct quote. I'm just going to say it.
We should probably reiterate the title is Revolutions at Varying Speeds,
yeah.
So the theme makes sense now.
So that the whole idea is a fake, like you said, a fake progression from basement punk band to pretentious 8-minute long experimental "we're too cool for this shit we used to do" style band. Revolutions at Varying Speed is meant to be played at 33 RPM and 45 RPM because it was recorded at two different speeds. So at one speed it sounds like a Doom song, and then he put it at 45 and it sounds like Orchid. And then they remixed the digital version because they wouldn't be able to have the both speeds on the digital version. So basically they did a 25-minute 800 times slowed down version and called it Revolutions in real time. And it sounds like Sun or something. And then there's a different song on the record. It doesn't specify which, but it's got two endings. So the thing about vinyl, he says, is it's like a road, and the road splits, and you can go either way, and that's just how the album ends on the vinyl version, which is fucking really cool.
It's pretty interesting, yeah. I think Between Two Mirrors and that stuck out as well because of the blast beat in it and the interesting slowdown.
Yeah, the main riff sounds like the Bronx to me. It's more kind of rock and rolly.
Yeah, it is.
And the main riff when it repeats is fucking really good, man. And yeah, towards the end when it goes like really full bore, like full throat blast is brilliant. I like Fuck the Future, Stole the Past and United Nations vs United Nations are both 3 really short songs, and they're supposed to be their demo, and they sound pure scrappy and raggedy as fuck, and it really works for me. The first one, Fuck the Future, is probably the best of the 3. It's really succinct and direct. I think it's really cool to capture that energy, even though you guys have been in bands and are professionals, quote unquote professionals, and have been, but still able to capture this energy of like, just fucking know.
How do you think you do that? Do you think you go in to record the demo without having practiced a lot? Do you think you say, right, we're only doing one take, something like that? It needs to not be perfect.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
I'd be a one take guy, right? Like, whatever happens.
I would go in to do the recording, but deliberately not let anyone rehearse for a month.
Just see what happens.
Which clearly is something I'd have to insist on in my current band. So how about we talk about United Nations?
Yeah, the debut album by the mysterious United Nations.
By the international body.
Yeah, so it's a very short record. It does exactly what it says in the term when it comes to screamo. It starts off with the spinning heart of the yo-yo. Lobby. It's so loud, full on, right?
It's a whirlwind start.
Yeah,
lots of chops, mixing up the genre, nothing stagnates. The vocal processing on it is ever so slightly reminiscent of Alec Empire from Atari Teenage Riot. It's good. It's quite different, a little boxy but kind of effective, and I think the mixes are overall a bit woollier than the next 4 years, but I have to admit I think I kind of prefer them. It gives the record a bit more of a distinct sound, and it feels actually a bit more underground.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean?
I like that it's got the same kind of, it's like Captain Midnight. It's got the same thing as that,
from Tomahawk.
Yeah, it just drops a chorus at the end and you're out.
Yeah,
you know, and it's the best, catchiest part of the song, and you get one hit and you're done. Not to think that they're actually really taking the piss at the Beatles. The second song is Resolution Number 9. It's got that ascending riff, which I think is just so much fun, and then the descending sort of tremolo bit. It sounds really apocalyptic. It's got a total Tin of Bees guitar tone. You know,
it's a bit more straight ahead, that one, with some really good riffs. Vocal energy is really high in it. I appreciate the self-aware sort of sudden stop at the end, because it's doing this kind of crescendo build-up, and then it just literally, somebody's just stopped the waveform rather than having any kind of decay or delay or anything. Like Resolution Number 9, that's how that ends as well. And the interpolate Yellow Submarine at the end, that's got the exact Revolution Number 9. Yeah, that's what I mean. See? But as we all live in a very yellow submarine, we all live in something like that. He says it towards the end, but it's basically, another reason why not to copyright, I guess. Possibly. No sympathy for a sinking ship. You know, it has that call and response quality that a lot of those kind of twin singer screamo bands had in the early 2000s. Do you remember when that was
like Blood Brothers and stuff like that?
Yeah, they were one that did particularly well, but there were loads of them. Bands starting up with two singers with a sort of slightly different range and different approach. So that's probably Daryl Palumbo doing the other vocal. Yeah, I thought that. We don't know for sure, of course, but it's some of the higher guitar parts soaked in delay are a bit more ambitious in this one in a slightly proggier way. But it still maintains that sense of happening in a tiny club space. I think because of that twin vocal, because of that era of screamo, it really reminded me again of the 13th Note in Glasgow, kind of low ceiling basement gig with wet walls and footprints in the roof. And I think it suits it, actually. It's one of the edgiest in their catalogue. It's probably much more of a straight up hardcore punk song, but with some blast beats chucked in towards the end. And to me, when it goes melodic, it sounds a lot like Thursday, but I guess that makes sense, right? The shape of punk that never came. I really love this song, man. See the single palm muting riff that begins the song? It continues throughout. Like, it's in the mix always, which is really cool. The production comes front and centre on this one. The guitar absolutely swamps the recording with layers of noise and this really gainy fizz. It's an interesting technique, and I can imagine an entire concept record being done that way. has an element of black metal lo-fi extremism to it.
I've got that as well.
I mean that musically, not politically. Behind that wall of hiss, there's this deceptively chunky, well-produced song, which is a kind of bonus. You know, you're trying to peer through that saturation, you know, picking it out. It's like maybe watching a sort of Hollywood movie whilst the sun is reflecting off your TV screen. You're trying to kind of look through the noise and pick out the thing that's happening behind it. I also just think the minute 35 drop is a good nod to Converge.
Totally, yeah. It's really ominous sort of melody, which is very Converge-y. It becomes a bit of a breather towards the end as well, because it does slow down, which is probably quite a clever thing to do, because this record is furious. And My Cold War is slower and a bit less punishing. It's more conventionally metalcore, I think.
I was going to say that, yeah, or like a screamy, emotional hardcore thing. It's a sound that was really common in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
Saw a lot of this kind of stuff. I think it's decent. It didn't grab my imagination.
Jeff's vocals sounds really unhinged, which to me harkens back to Early Thursday, which is maybe where he's taken that from. The guitar tone actually reminds me, particularly some of the guitar parts as well, it actually reminds me At the Drive-In, but just filthier. Model UN, diplomatic immunity. I love that. Just jumps right out at the start. That's that thing.
That's what you call that's what's going. That's what to go down. Nowhere to go.
This one I don't really enjoy. It sounds a little bit sloppy. It sounds like a really proficient high school band. I think the gainy second vocals in it are pretty naff, and I think the riff's a bit stodgy, a bit underworked. I thought it was a low light on the record.
I like the beatdown towards the end. I think that's a fun part of the song. I do think this song's got a different energy though, and it doesn't really work for me either. I just like the beatdown at the end. Filmed in front of a live studio audience.
It's a bit... This is a bit different. It's got that strummy acoustic start. It's a bit emotional and blackgazy. The acoustic guitar just persists, giving the song a kind of distinctive feel, but I don't know, something about the production, maybe the acoustic's actually a bit too high in the production. It feels a little bit tacked on. They lean into the earnest singing on it.
Yeah, Jeff goes Jeff.
Yeah, probably due to the acoustic providing that sort of melodic pretext, but you know, the vocal lines in it, they feel slightly improvised rather than as though he's properly workshopped them. You know, they're easy notes, they're easy melodies. It seems like the vocal line wasn't given a lot of thought. I'm speculating wildly, but it doesn't feel to me like they thought, oh, I could go in a more interesting direction. It's just very sort of by numbers. That's
quite interesting you say that, because Geoff Rickly's a vocalist with a really good sense of doing that kind of thing in Thursday, you know. I think for me, a song's mostly about atmosphere, you know, those sound bites from the TV and the hiss. It's not a heavy song, but the drums are heavy, and it reminds me of Struggle Takes a Square when they do melodic moments. And it's more screamo, even though it's not really screamy, than I think it is anything else, to be honest. And then Revolutions in Graphic Design brings us back to complete fucking chaos. Yeah, it's an angry one. The vocals have a really added edge of bitterness in them. The odd lyric pokes through, emphasising that vibe as well, and it feels like a really punchy tune.
I think the riff at 1 minute arrives in a really big way.
Yeah, it's beastly, that riff.
However, I will say, listening to it on headphones, it's a strange production decision because it goes from really wide panned guitar to this mega loud, much brighter guitar right down the middle. And the problem is that then competes with the vocal.
Mm-hmm.
It's a bit of a confused mix in a kind of stereo sense. I'm not sure I like that.
Mm-hmm.
I like the riff, but it just feels odd in headphones. I will say as well, we're on track 8, and it was at this point that I realised there has not been a single point in this album where the bass has grabbed me at all. There haven't been any standout lines, there haven't been any big hooks, and the tone feels quite pedestrian. I feel like the bass isn't doing a lot of heavy lifting on this record. There's a lot happening in the vocals, the drumming's great, some of the guitar lines are great, the bass is a bit bland.
Mm-hmm.
Is this by any chance our bland?
I've never even thought about the bass, so that actually...
Cliff Burton,
yeah,
all the way.
Cliff Burton all the way. Yeah. I mean, we don't know who played bass in it, so maybe it was Geoff. Maybe it was
nobody. Maybe it was actually Ronald Reagan.
Maybe it was.
Seen those pictures where they're all wearing Ronald Reagan masks. Maybe the thing is that Ronald Reagan was actually in this band.
Maybe he's in all the masks, clones of Ronald Reagan.
That's just silly.
I keep living the same day. I love how unsettling this song is.
I really like this one.
Mm-hmm.
Same day, I keep
It's just a minute of noise, then it's good.
Yeah, you know what? The crazy thing is, it feels like it might be on here as a wee experiment, but in fact, the total abandonment of conventionality makes it really stand out. The screamy vocal surges were really effective, and it kind of makes me wish they'd done more daft, inventive stuff, because it's only a minute long, and I wanted to hear more of it. I was sorry to hear it end so soon.
There's a second vocal buried away down in the bottom right channel somewhere, and it sounds like Daryl Palumbo to me. It's really hard to tell that it's there, but if you listen to it in good headphones, you can hear it right at the very bottom, and it's pretty cool. I just like that it's just a repeating phrase.
I think it's good. I wish they'd done a bit more of it.
Subliminal Testing has got the nastiest intro on the record. This one actually has a good bass tone as well.
It feels like it's getting a bit more adventurous, but the track doesn't really click. There's a few decent riffs on it. It's a strange mix again that kind of relegates the drums, and the drum beat in it is quite ploddy. I didn't think it was a highlight, and I'm not that sure that the tapping and the step up are all that successful towards the end of the song either.
It does go a bit thrash punk at the end, for sure. For me, this song's mostly about the different vocal layers. There's a backwards track vocals, which apparently, if you listen to it backwards, it says just to turn it back round, because you basically you listen to it the wrong way, so turn it back round and play it the right way, which is quite funny.
Very self-aware.
But yeah, it goes kind of sludgy before it goes to like thrash. I like the ebb and flow of this song, to be honest, man. And then the last song, or second last song technically,
Say Goodbye to General Figment of the USS Imagination. I mean, the title sounds like a botch title.
Yeah.
The drums pop more in this song, and it really doesn't mess around from the start. I like the dissonant drops, and the reintroduction of those brighter guitar riffs at 40 seconds is excellent. Mm-hmm. There's the weird riffs in there that give the tune a lot of personality, a bit of bite, and the vocals, I think, fit really nicely around what's going on, which is a good touch. It doesn't sound like it's everybody competing. It sounds like it's quite considered. points for inventiveness, but the post-rocky saxophone interlude's a bit flabby. I get that it's a bit of a gimmick, and it could be fun, but there's something just flabby about it. Like, it's been like, we've got this idea, but we're not going to fully write it. We're just going to do it because it's a funny idea. That said, you know, the sound of the brass is really nice. It's a palate cleanser. When you've been listening to a full Raging album, to hear brass is quite refreshing. It's got that 1980s New York kind of alleyway sax solo thing to it as well. I think this project is obviously the place for these guys to fuck about with ideas like that. I'm curious who in the band suggested it and how wasted they were. And as endings go, I can kind of broadly get down with it.
For me, the main riff at the start sounds like Mastodon. It's just huge, man. And when it goes into the jazzy section with the actual, and I've written here, actual fucking saxophone, there's loads of really... EFS, yeah. There's loads of really, like the guitar sounds that are bounced around the saxophone in the mix are really nice. Just the tones, I think, are really good. And there's little snippets of like sort of fragmented guitars that kind of pop up and down, which are quite nice. The drum just kind of drag the song along a little bit. I can tell you who actually played the saxophone. It was actually some jazz, like some proper jazz guy. Billy Horn. It was Billy Horn.
The brass was played by a guy called Horn?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and also the final thing is a hidden track, which is like 12 minutes and 59 seconds long. 13
minutes silence.
And it ends with the sounds of cash register.
I was going to say, it is exactly that until the cash, the till chime at the end.
And it's actually, in the CD version, when you ripped it, the track was actually listed as ka-ching.
I mean, yeah, I think it's a really interesting album. I think it should probably be more talked about as a curio. I think mainly because there's a band that put a record out and didn't copyright it, and people don't know who wrote it and who played in it, and that's really interesting. It's like, oh, listen to this record, who's it by? Well, I don't really know. And it's not copyright, so if you want to go and release it, go and release it, you know, put it in your movie for free. That's really fascinating, and I think that should be more of a widespread talking point. How good is the record? I don't think it's amazing. I think there were a lot of really good screamo and experimental albums around at that time. I think Converge's game was much, much higher, and that's probably unfair to compare it to that, but it certainly has lots of good moments on it. I'm a wee bit on the fence about it. I quite like the project. I think I would have preferred if the project had been a bit more political, as I said, rather than that kind of like cop-out, sardonic, you know, nihilistic Gen X thing. So yeah, I dig it. There's a space for it. Some really good playing. There's some great moments. I would abdicate decision on it. We're not three of us here today, but I'm going to do that anyway. I'm not shitting on it at all. There's a couple of tracks that I'll probably listen to again. Do I think it's an unsung classic? Ask me again at Christmas.
I think, I do think it's unsung. I think the band are, perhaps by design, deliberately under the radar, and I think that through all the stuff that, if you're aware of them, through all the stuff that happened to them, there's more of a legend as opposed to like a focus on the music. And I think the first album's really good. This came out when all that screamo shit was gone. You know?
It did.
So this is a bit of a throwback, which is another reason why I like it. Obviously, I think it goes in. So,
well, technically, it goes in because there's nobody here to refute that.
Oh, I mean, people can drop us a comment and say if they think. Let's see what they think.
If you disagree with Mark, unsubscribe.
Unsubscribe. Yeah,
that's how you run a business. Ka-ching. Oh, we are so synced up. Yeah, man. 4 years and we're finally on the same page. So, you know what goes along with this?
An Nexus.
It
feels like it's been a long time since we've done one of these.
We don't do them as often anymore.
Yeah.
A complicated series of connections between different things.
So the Nexus this week was chosen by the fabulous Mr. Kenny Bonella.
Mr. Kenny Bonella.
Regular contributor and outspoken man on the AAA Unsung Past
Oft,
group.
yes.
One of the highlights, I would say. So he's picked
Trade union leader and former miner Mick McGahey.
Mick McGahey. If you're from Cambus Lang, which you're probably not because you don't have electricity, there's a monument to him at the end of your high street. Our band used to rehearse in Cambus Lang.
Okay.
In an abandoned warehouse on the floor above the Cambus Lang Orange Band, who you can catch in Glasgow
This coming weekend.
this coming weekend, stomping about the streets, shouting at papes. Okay, this is a Bobby Dazzler. I've got a good one.
I've got a good one as well.
You go first.
Okay. So one of the members that is known to be in the Nations now is Jonah Bayer. His sister is Vanessa Bayer, who I believe roasted them before a gig one time.
That's a hell of a support act.
Yeah, because
you bring somebody up on stage to slag you off.
Yeah.
I should do that. Fuck it, it'd be a festival.
She's a comedian, former Saturday Night Live alumni. She was on the show for 8 seasons between 2010 and 2017, and together Jonah and her, they both do a podcast called How Did We Get Weird?
Is it better than our podcast?
I haven't listened to it. So her time on Saturday Night Live crossed over with that of Bill Hader, who is now currently directing, writing, starring, and was the creator of a brilliant show called Barry, which if you haven't seen it, I thoroughly recommend. It is genuinely one of the best things I've seen this year so far, and it's went from being a half-hour sitcom about a guy who is a hitman who decided to take acting classes and try to change his career to being something about one of the most horrible men in the world. It's fucking brilliant. Bill Hader is fantastic in it. Vanessa Bayer actually starred in one of the episodes in the latest season as well as a guest, which is pretty cool. Bill Hader's been in a bunch of films. He was in Superbad as one of the cops alongside Seth Rogen, and he also starred in a film called Year One, which was also starring Jack Black and Michael Cera. I haven't seen it. It's a Harold Ramis film, but that also stars Juno Temple. Do you know who you don't know who Juno Temple is, do you?
I don't think so. No.
She's an English actress, but she's kind of most recently gained acclaim for her role in Ted Lasso, which is also a really good comedy. She's brilliant in it. She plays like the wife or sort of the girlfriend of a footballer who ends up realising that she's just amazing at marketing, and yes, a fucking lovely story, man. You should watch it. She's great in it. She's the daughter of a director called Julian Temple, who's a documentary filmmaker who began his career by directing the music video for God Save the Queen by the Sex Pistols.
Interesting.
Yeah. And to be honest, probably could have got here much sooner by saying United Nations ripped off the Sex Pistols artwork, but
yeah,
that would have been less interesting.
What fun would that have been?
His sister is Nina Temple, a British politician, and she was the last General Secretary of the Communist Party of Great Britain, where she stood from January 1990 until its dissolution in November 1991. Trade unionist and former miner Michael McGahey was a fairly prominent member of the Communist Party of Great Britain. Indeed, he was a lifelong member, and after the party dissolved, he joined the Communist Party of Scotland, which he stayed a part of until his death, and that party itself dissolved in 2019. So, there we go.
Alright, that's my turn then. United Nations album, United Nations, from 2008, has cover art by Jimmy Cotty, former member of the KLF. KLF are most famous for allegedly, probably burning £1 million on the Isle of Jura. The Isle of Jura, by the way, I think was chosen because it's where George Orwell wrote 1984. Okay. Or the bulk of 1984. However, the KLF had a lot of other pranks and satirical initiatives. I would say go and look them up, but I'll probably use them for future next eye because they're...
Don't look them up then.
It's a real well. One that deserves a mention is when they trolled the Turner Prize, presumably for being horribly elitist and pretentious, and almost certainly as some sort of commentary on the state of contemporary art. So this prank took the form of the KLF setting up the K Foundation, which in 1993 ran in parallel to the Turner Prize, but offered double the prize money, so £40,000, for the worst artist of the year. They actually had a series of TV adverts announcing the impending vote, so it wasn't cheap. It just so happens that the winner of the Turner Prize that year also won the K Foundation Worst Artist Prize. That artist was Rachel Whiteread, the first woman to win the Turner Prize, I might add. She was famous for doing these plaster casts of everyday objects and spaces, from baths to bathrooms, like full living spaces as well as these large objects. In 1994, she made a concrete cast of an entire Victorian-era townhouse, removing the sort of superstructure, the walls and floors, etc., leaving this concrete representation of the interior. It obviously greatly divided opinion. The council in that part of East London did their best to demolish it as soon as the temporary licence had expired. Despite protestations from the artist and the art world, the council described it as hideous and at odds with the spirit and aesthetic of London's East End. I would like to point out, actually, at this point, I think it's pretty fucking cool. I think her art is actually really interesting. I get how some people would look at it and go, well, that's a big fucking ugly shape, but there's something fascinating about it. But I also think the KLS, or the K Foundation's initiative, was pretty cool as well. Both were artistic statements of merit, in my opinion, and although they ended up pitting two sets of artists against each other, I think that's fair game. You know, that was necessary to the statement and acceptable. Now, Rachel Whiteread initially refused the K Foundation prize, of course, which took the form of money that had been mailed out to journalists as an invitation, only to then be returned when they attended and nailed to a picture frame. But when the band, when she refused to accept it, the band credibly threatened to burn it, given that they had previous for burning money. So she then agreed to accept it. None too pleased, she immediately released a statement declaring that she was giving the cash to charity. So, as I said, whereas Rachel Whiteread was the first female winner of the Turner Prize, the first female nominee was Milena Kalinowska in 1985. It was the second year of the award. As a curator and educator, she is also one of only two non-artists ever nominated. Kalinowska was born in Czechoslovakia in 1948, following the Czech Spring of 1968 and the subsequent violent Soviet invasion and repression the following year. She purposefully joined a tourist trip to London in 1970 and then claimed political asylum whilst in London. She was, now I don't know how this quite worked out, I couldn't really find this part out, but she was subsequently sentenced to 3 years in jail for, quote, dissident activities in Czechoslovakia. The dissident activities basically entailed writing against the Soviet regime. She was also temporarily stripped of her citizenship until the time of the Velvet Revolution in 1989, which was shortly, I think it was about 9-10 days after the fall of the Berlin Wall. Now, talking of violent Soviet oppression, obviously we had the repression of Czechoslovakia. The Soviet invasion of Hungary in 1956 was similarly used to repress the burgeoning independence and reform movement that had sprung up earlier that year in that country. Now, that particular brutal military operation was strongly supported by one famous trade unionist, also the son of one of the founders of the Communist Party of Great Britain, a Mr. Mick McGahey. Mm-hmm. Mick McGahey was all about the Soviet repression of Hungary. His dedication to communist doctrine, nicely demonstrating the sort of inexcusable horror that kind of bootlicking authoritarian ideology enables. I should add, the repression in Hungary cost at least 2,500 lives, and tens of thousands of people had to go into exile. Revered by some as a working class hero, McGahey was a staunch and proselytising commie. As I say, he's already honoured with a monument in Cambuslang, which is a fittingly grim surrounding for a man that supported the communist regime. But the Scottish Government has also repeatedly mulled over the notion of further honouring him in some grander manner for the work he did during the miners' strike. I'm sure there's plenty of nuance to the man. I don't know why Kenny's nominated him. I don't know if Kenny's a pure fist in the air, like this guy was right on, or, as I know, Kenny doesn't have much love for proselytising communist bootlickers. I don't want to cause any offence, but as an authoritarian apologist and enabler, hopefully many a pigeon shits on the statue of Mick McGahey should it ever appear. Interesting.
Nailing your colours to the mast there, Chris.
I mean, there's no more room in the mast for my colours. I've nailed them up there so many times. But yeah, there you go.
So we're doing next week?
Next week is a special request by myself, but also courtesy of the bottomless trove of musical knowledge that is Ferruccio Quirchetti. And we are going to do For the Whole World to See by Death. Now that is Death from 1971, the proto-punk trio, not Chuck Schuldinger's metal band.
The original Death.
And it's bloody good.
I'm excited to hear it.
Yeah. So Ferruccio will be bringing it big time, as he does.
Nice one. well, I'm excited for that. I genuinely am. I think it'll be good.
Yeah, it's going to be a belter. Totally seminal band.
Mm-hmm. So join us next week. Also, if you could share this with your friends.
If you have friends.
If you don't have friends, get some friends and share it with them. Share it with your ma, share it with your granda, whatever.
If you don't have friends, pay us.
We'll give you some friends.
You'll get access to the AAA Unsung page, and you can make friends there.
Yeah.
You can talk to Kenny about communism.
Take it easy, folks.
Bye.